Do you have anyone in your life that you want to change? Anybody? Do you have anyone out there that may not be attached to you, but you see from a distance that you're like, man, if they could change? Anybody? Okay, we're all on the same page, same team. Okay. Sometimes it's helpful just to name that. There is a tendency inside of us that wants to change things. I cannot count, even in the last 3 or 4 weeks, how many times I hear something around the lines of man, this world is just falling apart. And man, things are just so bad. And we kind of can keep going down the things that we could say about that, the idioms, the short phrases. But what we're really naming underneath that is can people just change? If people could just change, then these things that we don't want to have happen, these atrocities, these horrible things, these hard things, the things that actually shouldn't be happening, if people could just change, then these things wouldn't happen anymore. So I would offer to you that the desire you have inside of you for other people to change, I would offer is a good one. That there's something that desires different and more than what's actually reality in this moment. That is not a bad thing in and of itself. The way you go about it and what you're wanting to change about someone now becomes, I think, the part for conversation. And I think Jesus has a way through. That he actually talks about looking at other people's lives and making decisions about them and what to do with that or not do. And he actually has a through line for more change to happen around our lives. And so what we want to do this morning is continue in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus' greatest hits, some would call it. Maybe his most famous teachings kind of truncated into a few chapters Matthew 5, 6, and 7. If you're new to faith, if you're exploring Jesus, this is a great place to start. If you are old in faith and been around for a while, this might be the greatest place to return to over and over again. But we see what Jesus is doing. He's talking about a few things. One, he's talking about the heavens. He's actually painting a picture that you have this life on earth, and then there's also this thing called the heavens. And the reality of what Jesus has come to do is actually bring those heavens to earth. And that you and I could experience something beyond just our ordinary, mundane life. There's something else going on in this moment if we could actually see it. And then what happens if we're open to that, the type of people that can receive that, and then the type of people that we start to become when we receive it, he talks about that for a while. And then he deals with a few bigger things in our life: anger, lust, adultery. Those were fun ones to walk through. But he actually starts to say there's something inside of us that this stuff comes out of. We can look at these maybe ways of people entering into lust or anger or adultery or whatever it is, but it starts somewhere, and it's inside of us. And so therefore, there's some ways to actually work towards the heart. And then he addresses hypocrites, people who are doing a certain religious thing for the sake of other people, not for the sake of change. You want those people to change, don't you? You know them. You're these people are such hypocrites. There's something about that he's saying, but hold on, what about you? What if you were actually doing something more in secret so that you could develop a certain life that then could actually change? Last week we talked about our stuff, our money, our possessions. That was a fun one also. And he actually has a lot to say about how we relate to our money. Over and over and over again, Jesus is just coming after, especially the paid religious leaders in the time. And now he gets to the idea of our desire for people to change. And he says this off the cuff: do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like I could just, pray, amen, let's go on. It's just don't do it. Let's just stop judging. But if he's so clear just to this next step after our possessions and the eyes in which we see the world, are we seeing the world as generous and good? Or are we actually stingy and feeling like the world does not have enough for us to experience the fullness of life? And then very quickly he says, do not judge. If he says do not judge, he's assuming something. What is he assuming? You judge. You and I judge. Do not judge. Or the way in which you judge, may we not forget, it's actually going to come back towards you. Like, if you start to have certain measurements for other people, why would they not have the same measurements for you? And or, are the measurements you have for others coming out of the measurements you have for yourself? We'll see the word hypocrite here again in a minute. But what if I'm so critical of myself, that's a part of why I'm so critical of others? This idea of judging, the Greek here is krino, and it's simply to make a distinction. So we hear culturally right now, well, you can't judge me. Who are you to say something about my life? Well, you're a Christian, you shouldn't judge, right? So, because very quickly you take do not judge and now just like copy paste all. No formatting attached to it. Isn't that like the third layer of the copy paste? Like, you can't judge. So then, how do people change? If no one is allowed to speak into anyone else's life, how does anybody change? Well, maybe their life completely unravels and falls apart and they just come to an epiphany that, oh man, something might need to change. And that is real and that happens. But what if it doesn't always have to get to that point? What if there's like real things in people's lives that a part of what God is doing is designing a new community of people that could actually say things and receive things, and then say things and receive things? It feels very countercultural because anywhere else you go, well, you can't think that about somebody else. You're judging them right now. You can't judge. But then if you can't judge, how do people change? So this word krino, to make a distinction, we see it throughout the scriptures. I'll give you a few examples. Titus 3:12, as soon as I send Artemas and Tychicus to you, do your best to come to me at Nicopolis, because I have decided, krino, to winter there. Simply, this could just be, I made a decision. I made a decision to drink coffee this morning. I decided. So very quickly, just because what Jesus talks about here doesn't mean that making a decision is bad. We make decisions all the time. And a part of this is krino, and it has to do with the discernment, the way in which you and I are interpreting the world and our life and other people and what we arrive to decide. Another one, John 18:31, Pilate said, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. Krino him by your own law. There is a court system that makes decisions, ramifications, and the consequences of certain actions. So do we just get rid of a court system? Do we have no laws in place that try to attempt to hold accountability and serve just punishment for those actions? Do we just get rid of that? And now we just go back to the Wild West in some sorts? And it's an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth and just the survival of the fittest. Anyone just stands at the end of the day. Also, 1 Corinthians 4:5, therefore judge, krino, nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. It doesn't seem that Jesus is saying, shut off your brain and stop making decisions. We don't just become dumb all of a sudden and just passively walk through life. You and I are to have discernment. The Bible talks greatly about discernment and the way we think and the way we view and the decisions we arrive to, how we go about making those decisions, prayerfully, with others. And it doesn't seem like he is anywhere else. He is saying to get rid of a legal system, some time of punishment for, again, poor actions. But what we see throughout the scriptures mostly is this 1 Corinthians 4:5. And so two things we learn. One, krino, to judge, is something that God does. To bring judgment is something that is God's responsibility. And it involves exposing the dark motives of people's hearts. That the judgment in which God is up to can actually reveal and expose the motives that are not aligned with his kingdom. Motives towards yourself, motives towards your others, motives towards the rest of your life. One author puts it this way: a censorious critic is a fault finder who is negative and destructive towards other people and enjoys actively seeking out their failings. Such a person puts the worst possible construction on the motives of others, pours cold water on their schemes, and is ungenerous towards their mistakes. Worse than that, to be censorious is to set oneself up as a censor, and so to claim the competence and authority to sit in judgment upon one fellow's human beings. But if I do this, I am casting both myself and my fellows in the wrong role. Since when have they been my servants, responsible to me? And since when have I been their Lord and judge? See, it seems that this thing of judgment that we do moves very quickly from making decisions to condemning others. How many people have you condemned by the one sentence they posted on social media? See how quickly it happens? 143 words go out, and all of a sudden, the amount of decisions we have made about who they are and who they're not. How quickly we rid people off because of one thing, one action, one word said. See, there is a great gift in having discernment and decision making. At some point, it has a great shadow to it. That we now become both the juror and the judge in people's lives. This is only grown by cancel culture. Very quickly, everyone sits in the ultimate seat of judgment for anyone else, and we determine that someone has no chance or worth at coming back to something, that they are too far gone, whatever it is. Now, here's really what's interesting. Can we go back to, go back to 7:1-2. Just a couple slides back. Perfect. Now, really quick, I just want to point this out. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. This idea of measures, meaning that what you and I have is we have a set of values that we actually make judgments of, that we try to discern what's going on, people's lives, work contexts, the way you interact with your neighbors, when you sit down at Thanksgiving table, like over and over again, we have sets of values that we bring into every room and every relationship. What's fascinating is that the person sitting next to you has a different set of measures that they use to make judgment, to decide things. This is why gossip is horrible. This is why gossip is not a part of the way of Jesus. This is why gossip is not a way of the kingdom. Because what's happening is someone has made a judgment by their own measures and is asking someone else to then make the same judgment not by their own measures. This is why you could have a hard time with someone in your life, and yet the person next to you doesn't have a hard time with them. When you go to Thanksgiving table, you have that one family member that you're like, great. And then your other siblings are like, what's the deal? I don't know. What's the problem? Whatever it is, it's important for you and I to realize that we have our own set of measures. And what seems to be happening is that Jesus is reminding us that there are many different measures to things. Not just the way that I see the world. Not just the way that I see things. And may we hold our measures generously. May we hold them out in front. Realize that they're a set of measures, not the ultimate measure. So when we're in relationship with others, which Jesus in this section of the sermon now is talking about, how do we now relate with other people? How do we relate inside this thing called the church, locally and globally? How do we actually display what it looks like in our workplace to be someone of the kingdom, and what it looks like to go first, and to not predetermining who people are or being the ultimate judge of who they are or who they're not, but to hold my values of discernment and to let them still guide me in ways, and I'll get to how we then expand upon that. But may we recognize that we have measures from our own lives, our own experiences. He continues in verse 3, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? So again, Jesus is getting to this crafty little illustration as if someone had a beam sticking out of their eye. And have you ever had a speck in your eye? I was trimming some of our trees a couple weeks ago, and you have this pole saw and you're under the thing. They're the worst, by the way. but it's better than paying like $4,000 for a tree trimmer. And I got like this minuscule little drop, and it bugged me for like 3 days. And I couldn't find it, I couldn't rinse it. It was the absolute worst. But the plank, yeah, you can't even live. You can't sleep, you can't wake, you can't go back. So Jesus is drawing a massive contrast here. And he is inviting us to consider our own life first. Now, what's interesting, though, is you see a speck. You see a tiny bit of dust in the life of someone else. But then you're just supposed to well, I can't say anything because I have a plank somewhere. I don't really know what it is, but apparently you just are not supposed to judge. But what if there's an invitation for you and I to grow, to change, that might actually lead to the change in which we desire? What's interesting is that it seems to be Jesus is pointing towards change in people, and the best way for that is for you and I to first change. Yesterday, we had Dr. Cheryl Duke-Smith, who's a marriage and family therapist, and she ran a Creative for Connections workshop for our church. And we had a handful of couples that went through a grueling day, 8:45 to 4 p.m., of connecting with each other. And some of you are in the room this morning, like how to connect and to go back and to understand each other's stories better and to have new tools and ways of conversation and how to see the other person beyond maybe just the initial way in which you see them. And one of the things that I heard Cheryl say along the way, and I was in for bits of it, but she talked about oftentimes when we look at someone else, we start to draw an arrow or a line towards them as a way of judgment or making a decision or whatever it is. And then she brought the idea up of a U-turn. And so our tendency is to move towards someone else, to make a judgment, to make a decision about them. But now the invitation is, I'm about to make a decision about them. Hold on. May I start here? So now when I go to look at someone else's life, the way of the kingdom is to have an invitation that says, oh, let me come back to myself. Let me start here. And then it creates this loop. And I go forward, and now I come back to me. And I go forward, and I come back. This is a way of being open to the beam in which you and I carry in our eyes. Every bit of sawdust that invites us forward, we come back to the beam. One of the ways of doing that throughout the scriptures is self-examination. This is a brutal place. I do not wish it upon the weak. There have been people in my life over the last several years that have helped me foster this. I am an Enneagram 3 who looks out at the world with great optimism and has no time for going back. And so I have breaks in my life to check it, paid breaks. I pay a spiritual director, I pay a therapist, I have 3 mentors that I regularly reach out to and talk with, and every single one of them have a role in my life of helping me examine myself. My spiritual director spends time asking me questions around the things that I'm saying, inviting God as a part of that for me to then grow an awareness of God in my life and the people and the actions in my life, and ultimately keep coming back to, and what's that mean for you? And what's your part in this? And how do you feel when that comes up? Like over and over and over again. It is not a natural thing to do. What's easier, more comfortable, and within our control is to cast out towards other people and go after the sawdust in their eye and keep everything of change to them. Well, if they could just change. Well, if that didn't happen. Well, if that could be different. That's just our natural human tendency because it's a way of protecting ourselves. Because what self-examination is painful. It's holding up the mirror in front of you, and you cannot now live without reality in front of you. And so I wonder if I just shut up for a second. I wonder how these questions hit you this morning. As just a quick minute of self-examination. Can you imagine the change in people's life if that was a regular practice? Beth, I saw your card there. You have the Daily Examine card that we have printed and put out sometimes. This is actually a regular practice of those that have covenanted with God and people for ages now. The Daily Examine is one of those. It's 5 questions at the end of the day where you just reflect back on your day. And it exposes you. And it exposes God's movement. And what happens over time is you can become more clear of where God is acting and not, and where you missed something or not, where you might need to go back and redo something with someone over and over again. Where's the area in which you need to receive grace in your own life? Because I'll tell you that you cannot extend grace if you first and foremost have not received it. You cannot extend forgiveness until you first and foremost have not received it. So the self-examination, God help us, is the way for you and I to change. Over and over and over again. This is not easy. This seems like the simplest one in the Sermon on the Mount, but all of these just feel like the hardest. Because then he says, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. See how Jesus still leads to judging? You still end up at a conversation with someone. You still get to talk about the thing that you see that they may not. It's not a passive relationship with those in the kingdom. We are actually to be people who say things to one another. But I would argue that we can't get to ever saying anything for one reason. We're too insecure because of the plank in our own eye, and we're aware of it. So therefore, we just back up. And without self-examination, then we just run in harshly banging people with the plank in our eye because we haven't actually done any work to take it out. So then everything blows up all the time. Again, the Thanksgiving table. Like, it's just butting up against each other over and over. And then they can see your glaring freaking beam. And they're like, you want to come at me about this little thing over here? What's going on? I had a buddy recently come to me, and he's like, dude, I don't know what to do. I posted some picture, and I was with a couple people. One of them is well known in this certain small circle. And I put it out there. And then the person hit me up, a friend of mine, and starts talking to me about how concerned they are about me posting something for my own acclaim, that this was helping me look prestigious or something like that. And he's like, does he not know himself? He posts weekly, over and over again, ways in which he's trying to like posture in a way. And he's just like, why would I ever listen to him in this area? So what he's saying is maybe potentially there was a speck there, but why would I listen to the person with the plank if they haven't done the work about the plank or the beam in their eye? So then now you're just in this contentious thing, and then no one ever changes because now we feel insulted or we feel like, well, you're a hypocrite. Why would I listen to you kind of a thing? See how quickly these things just like degrade and dissolve without self-examination. Jesus is holding at the center here that we are to live lives of self-examination. And then we can honestly, in front of others and with others, deal with reality the way that it is. But if not, what then happens is that we just try to manage our image. And when we manage our image, we become imaginary. And now we're hoping people that like the imaginary me and not the real me, so therefore they don't even like me. They like the imaginary me. Continues, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. There then becomes discernment after you've done the work of self-examination. If there is a bit of dust in someone's eye, there then becomes the work of discerning, is it me to say something? Is this the time to say something? Is this worth saying something? If I was to say something, how would I go about it? What place are they in to receive or to not to receive this? Do I have enough trust in the Do you see, like the examination process continues, but now it starts to move outward. And he's saying essentially, like, there are holy things, there are things of God that may not work, one, for the unholy. He calls it clearly here. Oftentimes, dogs and pigs would be considered of the Israelites or those outside the covenant with God. And he's saying that there are wise things within life in God that might not make sense for the world. And if you just throw it out there, it's probably just going to get trampled on. So why do that? This, I think, would be one of the weird things about Christian nationalism, is that there is an idea, and again, Christian nationalism moving far beyond right. We're going very far beyond that. It's not a right or a blue statement, or a right or a left statement, or a red or a blue. Christian nationalism is something of its own. And what happens with it is it's saying that all of culture now is to respond to the kingdom ethic. Where did we get that? Where did Jesus go around ridiculing the Romans of the way in which they lived? He did it through his teaching and creating a subset of a community called the church. That is the way, and he's inviting people to change first and foremost. And so in this, why would we throw this stuff out there like that? And you then have to consider the other person. Are they in a place? Does this make sense? Do you have enough trust? Because if not, what's going to happen is it's just not going to go well. It's not going to be received. Therefore, on the other side of this, so far I've been talking from the perspective of, are we doing the work to then have a conversation? The other side of this says, the way of the kingdom, people in the church, should be the people that can receive feedback the best. That when someone does bring something up, we should be pretty great at saying, okay, hold on. I don't know if I understand that. I don't know if I see it that way. Tell me more. Hey, hold on. We pull some other people in because I don't know what to do with this. It's we can do things within a community of people that we should then be open when someone brings something to us. Because it doesn't always mean it's true. It doesn't mean always that's the only way about it, or that's the only way to see it, or that's the only meaning. But we can be open because we're people who are doing self-examination and we're considering our own life. And so therefore, if we're considering our own life, it's helpful to have other people say things that might hurt, that might not make sense, that you might not see right away, but could be really true, could be half true, could be a tenth true. I would rather want to know than not know, though. Because if not, I just keep showing up the same way and the same patterns continue themselves. So what breaks the cycle? What changes me? So both and. If someone comes to me with something, then there is some work to be open to it. And I would argue that the kingdom is fostering something. Life with Jesus is fostering us to be those people. R.T. Kendall, in his book on the Sermon on the Mount, he has these 4 questions to help us discern, is this worth having a conversation? Is it necessary? Is it going to encourage? Is it going to energize? And is it going to dignify? Is it truly necessary to say this or not? I mean, a lot of the stuff we offer other people probably isn't that necessary. It's actually out of our own anxiety and our own need for control of the situation. But is it really necessary? 2 would be, does it encourage? In the end, is it actually helping uplift their heart? Is it motivating them forward? Is it bringing out the gold in their life, one way you could say it? Will it empower their spirit? Like the internal of their being, is there something that's going to be coming up that's going to be empowered to then propel them forward towards something? And then lastly, will it increase their self-esteem? Is this done in a way that reminds them that they have value, that they have dignity, that they are worth something beyond their actions, beyond their words, beyond their views, beyond the way they vote, beyond whatever it is? Does it actually still dignify them? Because if not, you've become juror and judge. You have ultimately decided that you've made a judgment on them. And you've decided that they are on the out. And that is the opposite of what Jesus seems to do, which is why he spends time with sinners. And he spends time with the prostitute. And he spends time with anyone who was seen outside of good old religion. It seemed that he spent time with. He was restoring dignity and value to those who seem to have gone too far. To sum up, the command not to judge is not a requirement to be blind, but rather a place to be generous. Jesus does not tell us to cease to be human by suspending our critical powers with the help to distinguish us from animals, but to renounce the presumptuous ambition to be God by setting ourselves up as judges. In one sentence, seems to be what Jesus is up to. This sucks. Does it not? Like this, you can't do this. I was listening to, there was a story from a guy, Pastor Greg Boyd. He was in Minneapolis, and he was telling a story about how, I think he was at an airport or a park or something like that, and he's just sitting there eating his food, and everyone that walks by, he's just like, attractive, unattractive, thin, tall, big, short, color, non-color, with kids, yelling at their kids, nice to their kids. Like, he's just like sitting there, and everyone that walks by, he's just doing this stuff of judgment. He's making judgments on these people by one little action or just them standing there. And he started to feel actually convicted by this. Like, why am I so quick just to make judgments of people all the time? Now, again, this is kind of like a non-intrusive way into people's lives. It gets worse than that. But then he just said, you know what? I don't like the spirit of judgment. It's how quick I am. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the day is I'm going to make a decision right now to just speak blessing of people. So from here on out, every person I look at, every eye I meet, every person that walks by, I just want to think. He's not actually going around saying it to everybody, though you could. Just got to be open to whatever weirdness that brings. He's actually just thinking like, man, God sees them. Man, God created them. Man, they need grace. May your grace come in their life. Like whatever it is. But how hard that, like he had to like mentally make this shift and then intentionally do it. But could you imagine how he starts to change? Imagine how you and I could start to change. Let's use our brains to make decisions on things all day long. Let's use our discernment of our spirit to determine, is this good, is this bad? Because we can also make decisions on people's fruit. That's okay. Like, you know what? That's causing atrocities across the world. That is not a good thing. Like, let's make judgment about that and then let's take action on things. So again, judgment moves us forward, but may it be done in a way that's opening us up. So I'm going to end with this. We're not going to break this one down. Worship team can start coming up. But he ends here. He makes a shift that if you're reading it plainly, you might think, wait, hold on. Where's he going now? This feels disconnected. This is something different. But then he says some pretty famous words. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks the door will be opened. What if much of this, what if the change you desire in others, what if what starts to come in and through self-examination, what starts to come at you from and inside the community of people that you're with that can speak honestly into your life, what if the turn then becomes, God help? God help. I'm asking for this change in them. God help. Will you continue to go back to him? Because what you're ultimately doing is you're reminding yourself and you're declaring to him that he is God, not you. You are the ultimate judge. You are the one that will bring ultimate judgment in people's lives, not me. I don't have to do the work of trying to say this person is a Christian or not, or a martyr or not. I can just be. And then in my own way, I can do a life of self-examination so that when I move towards other people, it's filled with grace. And it's filled with love. And it's filled with kindness. And it's filled with generosity that I don't have to self-protect in all of these things. Because it's interesting that he uses the I when just the section before in our treasures, he uses the I. He's connecting themes throughout, and he's asking, do you and I have a generous eye or a stingy eye as we look out? If our eye is stingy, we will grab and hoard as much wealth as possible right now. If it is generous, we will just simply give ourselves away. If our eye is stingy and not willing to do the work of lightening and removing the beam in our own life, or is it generous to say, God, I need you to do this so that I can show up like this, so that I can relate like this, so that we can live in community like this? Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Again, he is a generous God. He wants to bring change both in your life and the lives of others. May we come to him for it. May we ask him. May we seek him. May we knock on the door over and over again. Because then, this is the only way we can do this next part. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. One of the earlier parts in the Sermon on the Mount is he actually invites us to surpass the law of the prophets. To not just know it, but to become it. That there would be a surpassing righteousness or a surpassing virtue in your and I's life. And he said that if we can be people who would do to others what you would have them do to you, this sums it up. This is the golden rule as it's known to be. The more that you and I take on this first part, that we do the self-examination, the more we can actually hold the lives of others in front of us and actually be open to moving towards them in a way that we would wish they moved towards us. Could you imagine your workplace if this was true? Relating to employees, relating to coworkers, relating to bosses. If every meeting you went into, if every day you showed up for work, if whatever it is, it's, man, I want to treat these people as if I expected to be treated by them. Your family. When we start to look out at the world and we look at everything going on with immigration, we have a lot of questions to ask and a lot of good ones, right questions to ask. But do we forget, man, may I treat others the way I would want them to treat me if I was in their shoes? For those that have picked up certain diseases from promiscuity, how would I treat them if I was in their shoes? How would I want to be treated? That people group that you disagree heavily with and can't believe. How would they want to be treated, and what if I operated that way towards them? The neighbor that you cannot stand. It's real life. Like, how would they want to be treated? Because that is the question in front of us over and over again, that Jesus is saying a person of the kingdom is asking this question first and foremost. And it won't work all the time, but it will work more often than not. So may we be people open to this. Why don't we stand together? Isaiah 61, the prophet Isaiah says, "The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting to the Lord for the display of his splendor." God has already made judgment on every single person, and he will one day judge again on the receptivity and the invitation of the judgment he has already made, that he is a God of love and mercy and kindness and has already made the decision to bestow upon every single person that love and that grace and that mercy. We serve a God who does the judging, and I would offer that he judges rightly. We don't have to do it. How will you and I respond to this God? For some, it's a re-response in some ways, that there's something coming up this morning that the Spirit is nudging you about, to invite you forward into a God of love and grace towards you first and foremost. And maybe for some, this decision has never been made to make the judgment that God is good, and that he wants to be a part of my life, that he has come to give me life beyond what I can, and that his forgiveness in his own judgment has already been extended for the separation that you and I have from him. So we're going to sing. I'm going to invite the prayer team forward after this, and then those that want to respond in prayer, that time will be then. So why don't we sing together?